What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Gin College Podcast. I'm your host, John J. II, alongside college football insider Sam Vitale. Sam, how you doing, buddy?
Hey, you good? Doing good, John. Good to be here with you.
Likewise. Hey, so it's the final stretch of the year, and it seemed like it passed us by. It seems like it does that all the time. But the college football playoff championship is here. I guess what causes the season to go by so fast every single year? Is it just time flying? Are we getting older? What the hell's going on?
This season actually went by a little slower for me. It runs by quick when your team's on top. So this year, not having Michigan around the playoff conversation kind of made it seem like it was crawling. About November, we were already trying to wrap up the regular season and start talking about Bryce Underwood already. So I'm on the
Right.
flip side of that coin.
Yeah, Bryce Underwood. I mean, he's the talk of the town when it comes to Michigan football, the new horizons of the Sharon Moore era of Michigan football. So there's tons to talk about regarding that going into the offseason. So I'm excited to dissect that a little bit more with you going forward. But let's look at the topic at hand. So the championship, college football championship, playoff championship, whatever you want to call it, CFP championship. It's the biggest game of the year. You're fighting for all the marbles here. First year of the 12th team. Notre Dame and Ohio State, OSU -8. I guess just looking at it from a bird's eye view, how the tournament's gone on so far, is this a fair spread based on how these teams have played?
It's so hard to say. Personally, I couldn't take Ohio State -8 points. I think it'll be a closer game than that. But based on what Ohio State's done in this playoff, really what they've done since they lost to Michigan, Oregon, Tennessee, and Texas, they beat them by an average of 20 points. So, I mean, if they're going to keep that up, they'll handily cover that 8 point spread. But I think Notre Dame's probably better competition than the three teams I just mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely. And from Ohio State shocking the world and beating Oregon, the one seed, which seemed to be untouchable, really treating them like children in a lot of ways. I guess just to rewind the tape a little bit, what the hell happened in that game to cause Ohio State to basically beat the brakes off the Oregon Ducks? I mean, nobody saw that coming, did they?
I definitely didn't see it coming. It's really hard to beat the same team twice in a football season, especially a college football season, as we're finding out. It's just a difficult task. Now, Washington did it to Oregon twice last year, which was a miracle. They were underdogs in both of those games, but it looked like Ohio State just figured Oregon out, and I really don't think that Oregon played their best game there. I think it was a little sloppy. They seemed a little sleepy too. But Ohio State, I think, just came out with their hair on fire. I'm going to reference this like 10 times in this pod today, but after losing to Michigan, I think they just went balls to the wall, man.
It's crazy because you think that would happen before they played Michigan. But they almost looked like Oregon when they played Ohio State, that being Ohio State when they played Michigan.
Yeah.
But you could be right. I mean, I think that might have lit a fire under their ass that really created a perpetual flame that's continuing to burn going into the final game, and that might even have something to do with the spread that these Las Vegas bookies are making.
hmm
So that's how they get to that number, and it's just kind of a culmination of things, a domino effect, if you will, how that happens. Let's talk about some of the teams in the semis that fell. Let's talk about Penn State. So what happened to Penn State? I guess they were looking good. Coach Franklin was really happy with this team, what they had. Drew Aller seemed to be his guy. What happened with Penn State, and why did they fall when they did to Notre Dame?
I think they just got out footballed. I think Penn State's a really solid program, almost kind of a jack of all trades, but master of none on offense. Solid team, really good team. Got nothing bad to say about them. And in fact, a lot of their starters are coming back next year. I think next year they could make possibly a deeper run. I mean, I know that's only one more win for a deeper run, but no, they're a solid team. I think they just got out footballed. I just think Notre Dame really is that much better than them, and I think they met their match. Pretty similar to when they lost to Ohio State earlier in the year. nothing to say about Penn State in that loss. It was a close loss, 20-14, I think. It's not like they got their doors blown off, but I think sometimes you just run into better competition.
Absolutely. I want to highlight the running back, Nicholas Singleton of Penn State and the Nittany Lions. 15 carries, 84 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he did his part.
Yeah.
He could punch his ticket that game, win or lose, and be like, hey, I did what I had to do. I left
Mm-hmm.
everything on the field. And, could have been some errors. You got an interception thrown by Drew Aller throughout that game. A lot of struggles I seen the Penn State offense get locked down by the Notre Dame defense. And that's something we haven't really seen much of. But even translating into the NFL, we're seeing defenses penetrate strong offenses and really causing lots of havoc for those respected teams. And I definitely think that was part of the demise for Penn State. But it always boils down to who's going to show up, who's going to take the field, who's going to play the game of football better. And
Yep.
that was definitely the case in this game. Let's talk about Texas, switch gears a little bit. So Quinn Ewers, it was basically a back and forth game, very similar to the Penn State game, but more of beating the brakes off. I think that really took more effect than it did in the Penn State game, kind of coming down to a field goal. This was more than a field goal differential. What happened to the Texas Longhorns and what really led to their demise?
I'm going to sound like such an Ohio State hater here, but I just felt like Texas played a sloppy game. I felt like Quinn Ewers played a sloppy game. I almost felt like that game was going to be kind of the nail in the coffin to Quinn Ewers coming back for another year of college football. There was talk about him having some teams try to tamper with him, offer him 5-6 mil to jump into the transfer portal. And I thought that loss to Texas was going to kind of solidify that decision. But he just declared for the draft, so I'm wrong there. But really, I just felt like it was sloppy. I felt like Ohio State, every time they had their foot on the Longhorns' throat, they just kept pressing down on them, didn't give them any room to breathe, just out footballed them, which Texas did what they could. At one point, they had 3 guys manned up on Jeremiah Smith. They triple bracketed him. I mean, that's kind of taking it right out of Michigan's playbook. That's how Michigan went ahead and beat Ohio State, was just saying, hey, we're going to bracket Jeremiah Smith. We're gonna rush the hell out of Will Howard, and if they're going to beat us, it's going to be because he got to his third look all game in Carnell Tate. If Carnell Tate's going to beat us, that's fine, but we're not going to let Jeremiah Smith do it. Well, Texas tried to take that same route, and they just got outclassed. So hats off to Ohio State for that one.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it, just like that, they did get outplayed, but you put together sloppy football against a good team that's really can't play sloppy football.
Mm-hmm.
Won't allow themselves to do it, especially after losing to Michigan. Talk about a wake up call. I think that's a hell of a wake up call. And you put the two together. I'm surprised it was that close for that long
Yeah.
throughout the game, and then you get things to snowball. It has the writing on the wall for a Texas loss. And there was suspect things about the Texas Longhorns that you've seen sprinkled in there, very similar to the Georgia Bulldogs, where you see the suspect attributes,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, this is going to lead to some bad losses if this keeps up. And some of those bad habits could not be shaken by either of these teams, and they really reared their ugly heads coming down the stretch. So you look at all the teams that fell, even going back to Boise State against Penn State. And shame on me, Sam, because I had Boise State going all the way because I was riding the Ashton Genty train. I was thinking,
Yeah.
you know what, this guy should have won the Heisman, should have beat out Travis Hunter. Obviously, Travis Hunter is a hell of an athlete. I'm not taking anything away from him. But just looking at certain things like that, it's men against boys. It's a different league. You look at the Mountain West, you look at the Big Ten. The Big Ten's became a super conference. We know that. So when you put the two together, it's hard to have them be equal. And I think we're going to touch on that a little bit more when we talk about the 12-team format. So I guess let's just dive into the line a little bit more for this championship game between Notre Dame and Ohio State. 8 points. That could be because of a lot of reasons that we've already mentioned. The over-under is 46 via OddsShark. Does this seem like it's kind of a middle-of-the-road over-under. You got a lot of points to be scored. That's 23 apiece per team. A team might blow the brakes off the other team, blow the top off the whole game, and you can see this over get hit. I guess just looking at it face value, what would you take here, over under?
For probably the first time ever, I think I'd actually take this under. I have a hard time with the under. It's just a weird hitch that I have going on. But this one, I like that. 23 points apiece. I can definitely see this game being somewhere along the 21 to 17 route. I could also see it getting really, really low. I could see something more like a 10 to 13 here. You got some lockdown defenses, man. I know you got a ton of offensive talent here, two of the best quarterbacks in the game. A lot of people never even talked about this. Will Howard's numbers almost mirrored Dylan Gabriel's numbers this year, and he wasn't even mentioned in the Heisman race once the season started. And then, of course, Riley Leonard's a dog too. But these defenses, man, I mean, they don't give up a lot. They just don't.
Yeah, it's scary to look at these defenses and expect a lot of points to be scored on either side, especially looking at that over-under. It's kind of, I thought it was high. I really did. I thought it was high. I thought it'd be somewhere in the 30s, maybe high 30s, but you get it up there in 46, and that's subject to change between now and the 20th. So there's a lot that could happen between now and then. You look at better weight. You look at everything regarding to that, where the bettors are betting at. So a lot of things can change between now and then. But looking at 46, I would be looking at also smashing that under, just given what I've seen. And not only that, but given what the offenses of both of these respective teams have done. So, yes, they've played well, and yes, they've blown the top off of games, but it hasn't been by a lot. I mean, you look at the Ohio State game, you can consider them blowing the top off of that game. They won that one 28-14.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So these things could happen. I don't expect a big an air raid type of game, even though we could see it. We could see it. It's kind of one of those things you don't really know what you're going to get as far as what kind of game. They got a lot of weapons on both sides. But as far as those defenses, there's no question marks in that category. We're expecting those defenses to come out and play.
You might have actually just talked me into a Notre Dame plus 8.5 under 46.5 parlay on FanDuel.
Oh, baby.
I think you might have just convinced me.
Hey, if it wins, I'll take all the credit.
Yeah, I give it to
you. But I mean, you're teasing it, you're giving that half a point. I mean, what's the reason to tease it that half a point? I guess.
Actually, FanDuel rocks. That's the
did they? That's the hard spread.
8.5, and then that over under is 46.5.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
So you can see the lines are already moving. I wrote these numbers down probably an hour ago max,
Okay.
And we're seeing these numbers fluctuate for whatever reason. So. I like that as a hard spread on both sides, over under and the spread itself. I like that. I like that a lot.
If you could throw one touchdown score in there, I think we pay off the mortgage, John.
Oh man, I mean, starting to get a little dangerous in a good way. So I like it. I like the bet. I think it's good. But let me ask you this: what do each of these teams have to do to win the game? We'll start with Ohio State. I know that's one of your favorite teams. Might even be in your top 5.
Yeah, all right.
But what do these guys got to do?
For Ohio State specifically, I think they got to figure out the Notre Dame defense just like they did the Texas defense. Like I said, Texas did what they could. They brought the plan. They're going to bracket Jeremiah Smith and make Ohio State beat them somewhere else. Unfortunately for Texas, that's what happened. But that has to be the plan. You just have to. Sorry about that.
It's a strobe light.
I'm either onto something or it's telling me I'm way off track.
You got a good idea.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Man, I'm losing it. Yeah, lockdown Jeremiah Smith. Of course, the problem there, if you're going to get a little soft in the box, is that now you've got the two-headed monster in Quinshon Judkins and Travian Henderson to run the ball for Ohio State. However, we've seen it. Those guys can be stopped. But Jeremiah Smith really is, I think, pivotal to the whole game as far as what Notre Dame can do to stop them. It's got to start there. It's got to start right there with Jeremiah Smith. And the thing is, what makes it even more difficult, in my opinion, for Notre Dame is they run man coverage more than almost any other team in the country. That's what they're known for. That's what they're going to do. As long as they don't change anything, that's what they're going to do. So it's really difficult. It's really difficult to cover Jeremiah Smith in man coverage alone. That's hard. And then you're going to bracket him, so you're going to take a safety away from the rest of the field. How are you going to pressure Will Howard now? It's really, really difficult. That's really my big take for that. Now, when it comes to Notre Dame, I'm relying solely on that run game. Ohio State's pass defense, lockdown. I'm trying to run the ball right down their throats. Again, I said I'm going to reference Michigan 10 times. That's how we beat them. The winner of the Ohio State Michigan game, the winner of the
Oh,
winner of
baby. That's a nice hat.
Thank you. The winner of the game is the team that outrushes the other team, and I think that's what Notre Dame needs to rely on. And they've got the horses there. Jeremiah Love rocks, and we all know Riley Leonard can run the ball too. So that's what I'd be looking for.
Just looking at the stat sheets from both of these respected quarterbacks that have made it, I want to take a quick look at it just because we want to see how this is going to compare. Obviously, you're playing different teams now, are playing each other, but let's just look at Riley Leonard's stats from last game against Penn State. 15 for 23, 223 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. There should be an asterisk next to that because you can't do that against Ohio State and expect to win.
Nope.
So that can't happen. Looking at Will Howard, let's see here. What is his stats? Do I even have them written down? I don't even know if I do. This is bad luck. Okay, 24 for 33, 289 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. So you see a lot of these quarterbacks in the semifinals get some interceptions under their belt. That means they're getting pressure in the pocket.
Yep.
That means that can't happen, and you know that's going to happen. So these defenses could blow the top off the game themselves and likely score more points than the offenses if they let that happen, because this could get really out of hand if the defenses pop off. And each of these defenses could do that. They have the tools to do so. The secondary, the mid-level, and also the lines, DNs, et cetera. So if you can beat the quarterback and beat those running backs you mentioned from Ohio State to the edge, you really put them in a box, and you're causing them to get really creative on the offensive side of the ball with play calls, because they're going to have to figure something else out. And you lock down those running backs on either side, you're going to be in trouble as an offense. So
Got an interesting tidbit here for you.
let's hear it.
Riley Leonard has the 16th best PFF passing grade in the country when blitzed.
Really?
Yeah. And that's what Ohio State loves to do. They love to bring that pressure, man.
What metrics is that based off of, would you think?
So
You had to assume.
PFF, I don't know how often you poke around there. They're nuts. They grade every single player on every single snap.
Wow. So that's got to be more analytical and more in depth than probably any other stat sheet.
Oh, it's nuts. You're talking about in baseball terms like sabermetrics. You're talking about crazy drilled down statistics that they're using. If I was in the Travis Hunter for Heisman camp, I'd be using PFF to talk about why he deserves it. Because if you're going just based off of the stats on the stat book, well, at cornerback they didn't throw on him. So why does he only have a few interceptions? Because nobody wanted to throw the ball at him. That's where you would go to PFF and see actually he's being graded 95 out of 100 on every single snap because his coverage is so tight you can't throw at him. PFF's amazing for that. They'll tell you can look up stats about linemen and whatnot. Offensive linemen, you would never know. I mean, other than how many sacks do they give up? Wonderful website.
Well, you're going to have to give me that information. But basically, you're telling me that there's a source for stats that will give you more in-depth information, way more than a regular box score.
Oh, yeah.
Or individual teams, stats lines, etc. Stat sheet, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Even to the point of redundancy, where it's like, oh my God, I'm never going to need that stats line. I'm never going to need that in anything, except if this comes up, then I'm going to need that.
Yeah, for sure.
Like you mentioned, the Travis Hunter, Ashton Genty comparison, who was more deserving of the Heisman. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to need that, because that'll show me a lot of the things just outside of the intangibles, where the intangibles, you can't measure the intangibles. But with this PFF, that could be the bridge. It could be the transition to finding those intangibles and meshing them with the hard stats, because that's probably the only way to do that logically.
Yep.
Wow. Interesting stuff.
Yeah, I'll split the subscription with you. It's something like $10 a month, or maybe we could do in the Discord GSN shared account.
Yeah, I totally love that idea. I think we should do that ASAP. So let's move on. Let's talk about the 12-team format. I know we're running out of time here. The 12-team format. This sparked some controversy, definitely within our own community, but we were just kind of talking about it, and this actually sparked it in my head because I'm like, you know what? Looking at it face value and going back to the early shows, the early days of the GCP with Cody and I, talking about how they should expand. This is before it was even an idea. And then you heard a glimmer of an idea. Then you've seen a Reddit post about it. And then you've seen, the snowball kept traveling down the mountain. Next thing you know, you had an avalanche that we're getting out of the 4-team. We're building it to a 12-team. And now it's a reality that we deal with as college football fans and analysts, whatever you want to call us. We enjoy the sport. We love the sport. We watch the sport. We live for it. There's been some controversy. There's been some backlash about the logic behind the 12-team. Can you speak a little bit more to that and why maybe this beta testing year told us some things, and how can it possibly be changed going forward to improve it?
So I'm in the camp of 12 teams is too much. 4 teams was pretty good. Sometimes 4 teams is too much. How are they going to improve it? I can promise you the only way that they improve it is by expansion. If this had nothing to do with money and generating revenue, maybe they would come up with an alternative plan. Maybe they would shrink it down to 8, but that'll never, ever happen. It's only ever going to be expanded. The rumor is that come 2026, it'll get expanded to at least 14, if not 16 teams. I believe there's a tentative contract in place with no signatures on it because they have to work out the TV partnership deals. Everybody's fighting over who's going to broadcast the playoff games. It's highly, highly valuable for them. The reason why I say I'm an anti-expansionist and that 4 teams was great, maybe even too many. Again, we have to talk about this in terms of I'm not generating any revenue off of this, so I want to see what matters. I want to see only the games that are important to me. And I feel like I have to preface that too. Last year, you had Michigan and you had Washington, both undefeated, both conference champs, both beating great teams. Michigan has their signature win against Ohio State, and they go on to win their conference championship. Washington has their signature win against Oregon as an underdog and then beats them again as an underdog in the conference championship. You have the only 2 13-0 teams in the country, both conference champions. That right there just should have been the national championship to me. It really just should have. This year, following that same sentiment, and I know I don't expect anybody to like this or agree with me, Oregon should have just been the national champion after the regular season. They're the only undefeated team. Give it to them. Now, I understand that's not how it works. We go and we play the conference championship, and they got smacked. I get that. It just, to me, is about what did we prove during the regular season? What's the whole regular season for? Indiana, to me, is kind of a good example. They play 2 real teams. They play Ohio State. Now, wait a minute. No, I might have that wrong. Indiana had 1 or 2 losses. No, they only had 1 to Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And when they lose their 1 game to Ohio State, it was their only real competition of the whole season, and they get smacked. That to me kind of just shows that you're on a different tier. A lot of people were talking about before the season even started, Michigan could go 9-3. They would just lose to Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State in that order. 3 top 5 teams in the country. At times, all 3 of them have been top three teams. They should get in the playoffs at 9-3. To me, I completely disagree with that because that just proves that you're on a lesser tier than those 3 teams. Those teams are a tier above you. And I feel like we figured that out pretty quickly here just in this 1 year of the college football playoff. There really are levels to this. Indiana was never going to beat Notre Dame. SMU was never going to beat Penn State. Boise State was never going to beat Penn State. It was just never going to happen. The first round was all chalk. So I know I'm a Scrooge about the whole thing, and everybody just wants more football. I just have to look and say, what's the regular season for then?
Well, I wouldn't call you a Scrooge because I'm a firm believer in hot takes, right? That's basically what I pride myself on. That's why I get up in the morning. But, you bring up some really good points. But I guess my rebuttal to that would be, how do you put any team that's in the Big Ten? This could be the problem with super conferences too, and maybe partially the reason for regions and why they were ever implemented in the first place. because how do you put any team in the Big Ten in a certain tier, like Indiana compared to Oregon, for example? How would you put them in separate tiers? They're part of the same conference, and you look at the wins, losses; those align to allow them to be in the college football playoff setting with the 12-team format. Um, and the other problem with the super conferences is you're not going to be playing those teams to make a truly even schedule, even keel across the board to other teams. So you might have a lighter schedule than other teams do, and that could be a problem because there's only so many games in the regular season. But I guess how do you make that? I guess what's the fix to it? Because now you have the super conferences, no regions. That's going for the SEC or the Big Ten now. And you got teams, and then it begs the question: how do those teams that are the lower teams, the Boise States, the Arizona States, the SMUs, how do they get to the to the big dance essentially? And I think that what they're doing with the 12-team could be they're trying to make it too much like March Madness
Mm-hmm.
when basketball and football are two completely different sports.
Mm-hmm.
But even still, they haven't found the recipe. How do they find that recipe? And maybe expansion is the only way. But if not expansion, what's the answer?
I have to stick with the answer being to shrink that playoff back down and maybe make even more clear objective criteria as to what gets you into the playoff, because we're still on a committee format. Obviously, it's still an invitational. There are ways that you can get in automatically, like winning your conference. That'll work as long as you're a P4 team or the best G5 team. Um, but that's really, I think, a more objective criteria could help, and then just shrinking it down. Now, my opinion on this could flux. It could be different if next year Michigan sneaks in to the playoff backdoor, hosts a playoff game, and I'm in the big house when we beat the brakes off of the 12 seed. Maybe I experience that and go, okay, actually, this is the best thing ever. Um, but no, there's no turning back, John. They're just going to keep opening this up to everybody else, and really my biggest problem with it is they really pitch this thing to say, like you had said with March Madness, we can have more Cinderella stories here. Look at SMU. SMU joins a new conference, and all of a sudden they're in the playoffs. I mean, who was SMU a couple years ago? Nobody knew. Same thing with Boise State. They could be the Cinderella story. Unfortunately, who this expanded playoff is for teams like Ohio State, who in the 4-team format would have been knocked out of contention when Michigan beat them in November. This is for teams like Notre Dame, who would have been knocked out in week 2 when they lost to Northern Illinois. So I don't know. I'm pessimistic on this and saying, really, I think the fix, the cure that you're going to be sold is further expansion so that we could get a couple more, so we could get a couple 9-3 SEC teams in here.
Right, and maybe even give some teams that are Mountain West teams or similar to the like more of a chance to at least make it to the second round. You know what I mean? So they have a fighting chance of playing teams similar caliber to then eventually play some bigger, more top tier teams. I don't know if there's a fix, if there's a way to do it. Really, unless you split it up and say, hey, these guys, the Mountain West and some of these other teams, they're in their own category. These teams are the big dogs. They play the big dogs. Okay, kind of keep on. It's like in the dog park. They got a side for the small dogs. They got a side for the big dogs.
You talking about a G5 playoff?
Something like that.
Beautiful.
Something like that. I think it could happen.
I think a G5 playoff is much more likely than a playoff expanding in a G5 friendly format, because I can promise you Tony Petitti, the Big Ten commissioner, and Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner, those guys are out here running a business. Their conference are businesses. They've negotiated what it means dollar-wise to get playoff wins, to get into the playoffs. Notre Dame, because they're not in a conference, their football program just made $20 million to make it into the national championship. $20 million.
I heard
It's
that.
insane. The last thing that Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti, the two biggest players at the table, are going to allow is for revenue to go into the Sun Belt. Revenue that could go to the Big Ten or the SEC is not going to go to the Sun Belt. It's not going to go to the Mountain West. It's not going to go to the MAC. They're going to do everything they can to set up a G5 playoff before they allow more G5 teams into this playoff. Back in October, we had a nightmare situation for the guys who are interested in revenues in this sport. A nightmare situation when you had Navy, you had Army, undefeated and highly ranked. You also had Boise State up there. I mean, everybody in the community. BYU was up there. Nobody wanted to see those teams make it to the playoff, especially more than one, because it destroys revenues. You don't have that many diehard Army football fans out there. You just don't. They're great fans, but they're few and far between.
Absolutely. I think that's also part of it for the big wigs. They're trying to line their pockets with more football, with TV deals. They're doing this for a paycheck. They're doing this for reviews. They're doing this for a lot of notoriety in other areas other than the football itself. And other than, because we're thinking about it from a football perspective. We're looking at it from a football fan's perspective, how we should watch the game, how we should appreciate the game. But not only that, how the teams should be appreciating the tournament and how they should progress through the tournament, and what's fair and what's worthy, what's not. They're not looking at it like that. So in essence, what we're getting, at least what you're saying is, and I think I'm following what you're putting down, is we're getting the illusion of a fair fight by
Mm-hmm.
allowing more teams. But since that's happening, these teams really never had a fair fight. And the idea, the thought of a Cinderella story, while it's not impossible, and that's what makes it believable, that's why people buy it, is because it still could happen. But that's not really the reason why we see what we're seeing. The last point I'll make, I guess it's more of a question. Notre Dame getting that $20 million paycheck, not affiliated with a conference. Can the NCAA bring the hammer down on them and say, hey, all right, guys, enough's enough. You guys have lined your pockets enough. You've done it for so long, right? And you've honestly earned your right as a non-conforming team to align with the conference. It's been a talking point on this show for a long time. Can they bring the hammer down and say, hey, all right, enough's enough. You guys got to join a conference?
I don't know if the NCAA has that much power. Since the beginning of time, Notre Dame has flip-flopped back and forth between wanting to stay independent, wanting to join the Big Ten, wanting to join the Pac-12, wanting to join the ACC. Those conferences have reached out, even the Big 12. Those conferences have formally reached out to Notre Dame at times. Notre Dame's reached out to them at times, and it's just never been the right timing for them. Notre Dame's going to do what Notre Dame wants to do. The NCAA is not going to have any authority, in my opinion, to be able to dictate whether or not they stay independent or whether or not they're forced to join a conference. The only thing that's going to force Notre Dame to join a conference is going to be a fat paycheck that Notre Dame agrees to. But it's going to be on their time, and it's going to be a conference of their choosing. Obviously, the Big Ten or the SEC, probably the Big Ten. But that's going to be on them. At the moment, I don't really see much of a problem with it, other than everybody else had to go play in a conference championship game, and Notre Dame didn't. It would really shake up the Big Ten to add Notre Dame. I'd really love to see that. And sorry for smirking a lot during that last segment. I was trying to think of something to really wrap up my point. And I was going to say, the thing is, sex sells. And then I remembered one of the teams in the Natty is Notre Dame. So that's how
Yeah. Well, I guess what you're saying is Notre Dame is an anomaly,
yeah.
and they've earned their right to be an anomaly. They know they are,
Mm-hmm.
right? And hats off to them if they can maintain that right and do that and sail into the sunset with that right. Then more power to them. Obviously, they're going to do it for their own sake, especially if they're getting a paycheck from it. So I can't really blame them for that. But we'll look forward to this game. Last off, who do you take in to win the game? If you had a money line bet, who are you taking?
You convinced me. I was really not knowing where I wanted to go with this, and I think you talked me into Notre Dame covering. I really can't take Notre Dame to win this one. As much as it hurts, I would really hate to see Ohio State win the Natty, but I've got Ohio State winning, Notre Dame covering.
Well, and as a Michigan fan, you really can't be too disappointed regardless, because if they win it, you can say, oh, well, we still beat them in the regular season. Or if they lose it, be like, those bastards lost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They got that close and they lost. Take that.
Yeah,
Ryan Day.
I'll try to look at it as a win-win, but you hate to see your rivals win a national championship. It'd be much better in a couple weeks to sit here listening to the Buckeyes losing their minds, going, "You didn't win a natty and you lost to Michigan again." I need that.
Absolutely. All right, that brings us to the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Sam, you got any final words, final thoughts for the people going into the weekend?
Oh, just great to be here. Great to be here with you, John, talking football. Just really looking forward to this game.
Likewise, brother. As always, everybody, make sure to check us out in the description. All of our links, all of our socials are in the description of this podcast at the bottom. Go to our website, ginsportsnetwork.com, and follow us on Instagram at ginsportsnetwork and at gincollege. We'll see you here next time. For now, I'm John J. II alongside Sam Vitale for the Gin College Podcast. Have a great day.